Greetings, Raised community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Floyd Akins, who is the Vice President for University Advancement at the University of Toledo. Welcome, Floyd.
Hey, thanks, Brent. Appreciate being here.
No doubt. Really looking forward to getting to know you better. And I have been asking our guests a very similar starting question, which is I want to know more about your own higher education journey. And specifically in your case, I would love for you to take us back to junior year of high school. Who's that Floyd? Where was he? What was he into? And what led him to Eastern Illinois University?
Wow, junior year of high school. You are taking me back to the lunchroom where three friends of mine, we were sitting around the lunchroom table talking about where we were going to go to school, and we knew we were all state bound because at that time none of us knew what we all know now in terms of financial aid and scholarships and all those kinds of things. And we zeroed in on Eastern Illinois, and a friend of mine, he and I went down there, and the bottom line is everyone was very friendly. It was a small enough place, but it was big enough for us too. It was only an institution of 10,000 people. And quite frankly, after walking around on campus, I felt at home there. And it was there where I started my love for higher education, quite frankly.
And you were growing up in Illinois. What part of the state were you growing up in?
Yeah, grew up in the far south side of Chicago. And in fact, my mom of 95 years still lives in a house that I grew up in on the south side of Chicago. I put myself, one of the things that will not show up anywhere about me is how I put myself through college, which was the fact that at that time, if you were a college student over the age of, I think, 21, you were able to drive for the Chicago Transit Authority. So I put myself through college driving for the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, and I did that for 2 summers to help complete my college career and pay for college.
Floyd, thank you for sharing that. And I just have to ask, having been a longtime rider on the CTA, especially I lived in Chicago for 4 years out of college.
Oh, really? Okay.
You must have some stories. I mean, you don't spend 2 years. I mean,
2 summers. I've got stories for sure. I've got stories. I will tell you that it's probably very surprising that the bus that was the easiest to drive is the one that some people will call the accordion bus, but it's called the articulated bus because really it was like driving a trailer. You know, the back end of that bus just followed you wherever you turn, and whereas the other bus, if you needed to make a turn, you had to pivot out to make the turn. But yeah, my route was out of the Archer Avenue garage, and the longest route went from Harlem Avenue. For those who know Chicago, went from Harlem Avenue to Marina Towers, and you turned around and came back up State Street and went back to Harlem. So the number 62 bus, but we had times where we would sit and at the racetrack or sit at White Sox Park. But that's how I put myself through my last couple of years of college.
Did your mom go to college?
No, my mom went to business school for a short period of time. You know, I come from a home of 2 blue collar workers. My dad worked. My dad was a Teamster guy, and he worked on the dock, and my mother was worked at Cook County Hospital actually as a nursing assistant. She, at that time, I think they call them now, she may be a practitioner now in today's terms, but she worked in both pediatrics and the children's ward. Pediatrics and the burn unit at Cook County Hospital. And so that's my parents' life. And so we're just grew up very, very modest household.
And so to grow up Southside Chicago in that context, Charleston, Illinois, I mean, is it love at first sight? What's the experience? Had you traveled or spent much time out of the city? And what was it like kind of being the city kid downstate?
I wouldn't say that Charleston was love at first sight, but it was different. It was an opportunity to, it was just a totally different environment. I had not here, this was a kid who grew up on the far south side of Chicago, all Black community, had never really experienced what, the other side was like, for the lack of better words. I didn't know any other folks who didn't look like me, quite frankly. And I tell you, to take that back though, I would say that the first experience with that was driving for the bus. I was driving the bus in Chicago. You get to experience all of these different cultures driving through Chicago. Since you said you lived there, you understand. Now,
Totally.
also the thing about Chicago that some people don't know, but a lot of people do, it's a very segregated city, and which is unfortunate. But so you went in and out of these different neighborhoods. I think probably the drive that woke me up was I was coming out of Archer Avenue and heading downtown. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time I got to Halsted, I had a full bus, and I couldn't understand where these folks were going because it was 4 p.m. They were speaking a different language, Polish, Lithuanian. So as I got downtown, I'm on Dearborn Avenue, and they're ringing the bell to get off the bus. They're all getting off, and I'm trying to figure out where they're going. And it turns out they were the cleaning people. But my perception of those who were cleaning the buildings were people that looked like me. But there were this entirely different group of folks that were in the city cleaning. And at one point in time, from a historical standpoint, for those who are interested, Chicago had the largest Polish community outside of Warsaw. I don't think that's the case now, but at one point in time they did. So, but it was just an awakening for me, because I thought that the people that cleaned the buildings downtown were all brown and Black people. And that wasn't the case.
And so to go from sitting at the lunchroom with those buddies, check out Eastern Illinois and commit and study communications.
Correct.
When you think about building, or establishing your focus academically, it sounds like your parents weren't necessarily driving you in a specific direction, or
they were driving me to get the degree, but not necessarily in a specific direction, as you would say. But
and so how did you then shape? Do I study business? Do I go pre-med? Do I go communications? What led you down that path, and what were some of your maybe favorite memories within that undergrad experience?
Well, I was very familiar with communication because my brother studied at University of Illinois, where he went to school many moons before I had gone. He's 12 years older. So I had an attraction from that standpoint. But for me, the turning point for me was I was literally minding my own business at a women's basketball game at Eastern. And I was there by myself. My roommates had gone away for the weekend. It was I never forget the day. It was a blizzard outside, but the game didn't get canceled. So I'm sitting in the stands, and this gentleman tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I wanted something to drink. And I thought, man, I don't know who you are. But I'm a starving, thirsty college student. So yes, I'll say yes to that. And it turned out he was the vice president of the university. And his name was Glenn Williams. And we developed a very good relationship. And it was that relationship, in addition to two other important ones. One was my literature professor, who I actually to this day stay in contact with. In fact, before I took this position, I called her and we had a conversation. We talk at least once a year. Her name is Jeannie Simpson, and I credit her with, I tell her she saved my life, because she would make me come to the writing lab. And If she was not there, she'd have a graduate student there helping me. And that having that experience from both her and Dr. Williams, and then another friend of mine who I stay in contact with, Booker Suggs, who worked in student activities. All of those individuals are the people that helped lead me to higher education. I knew, so when I graduated, I knew I wanted to be in higher ed. I just didn't know what area I was going to be in higher education. But those mentors, and two of whom are still alive and I stay in contact with, are the reasons why I do what I do.
I mean, thank you for sharing without me asking, because mentorship is such a recurring theme on this podcast. And it just feels like there are those very specific moments in almost every one of our guests' lives when that equivalent tapping on the shoulder occurs, and you don't always know why it occurred. I mean, why? Why do you think he tapped you on the shoulder and struck up a conversation? And obviously you had to deliver on, your end of the bargain, because it's a two-way street. But and frankly, if he hadn't tapped you on the shoulder, sounds like we might not be talking today.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I would say that it was the start. It was the start of something, a very unique relationship from my standpoint. And, it wasn't about, you had this older, and you were talking about the differences of growing up in Chicago and going to Charleston, and here you have this gray hair, white male tap you on the shoulder that you don't know. And you've never met him before, and he offers to buy you a Pepsi. Pepsi is going to love this podcast, and you develop a relationship from it, right? That leads you to learning about what he experienced as an administrator, and it gets you involved in student activities and student government, and it leads you to, in fact, he was the one. I'm walking across the stage to get my diploma, and I get it from the president first, and then he shook my hand second and whispered in my ear. He said, "I just talked to the people at Grinnell. I think you got the job." And it was my first job out of college, which was an admission officer at Grinnell College.
Amazing.
And that's when I knew, when he had whispered to me in my ear as I'm graduating, walking across the stage, that he had received the reference call about my candidacy to be an assistant director of admission at Grinnell College. And that was my first job out of Eastern Illinois.
Well, I don't know how many Pepsi executives listen to the Raise podcast, but if you are listening, you've got a blizzard, the gymnasium, a kid sitting alone, mentorship, and life-changing career opportunities. If that is the script for a tear-jerking commercial, I don't know what is. But thank you for sharing. And I will just I will share that as we record this, I am 3 hours northeast of Grinnell, Iowa.
Oh, really?
I grew up in northeast Iowa, just outside of Decorah.
Oh, sure.
While my wife and I live in the Northeast now, we spend time back here. My folks are here and extended family. And so I've recorded a variety of these podcasts over the last couple of years from here in McGregor, Iowa. So take us down to the southwest to Grinnell, and just actually very curious to get your perspective on the experience in admissions, which there aren't that many of our guests who started in admissions. More often it was, I became a student caller, one thing led to another, or somehow, somebody introduced me to the alumni department and I started there. But we have had a couple of folks who have worked in the admissions space. What led you to apply at Grinnell? What was the experience moving from Charleston to Grinnell? Take me back to the first 3 months of that job. What stands out?
I'm going to plug a lot of eateries, I think, but as part of this story. But I'll tell you something about Grinnell. A friend of mine, who we're very close. In fact, he was my best man. and he worked at Grinnell at the time, and he was an RA, so he had got his master's degree from Eastern. We both worked in student activities together, so he went to Grinnell as an RA. So as I was approaching graduation, he called me to tell me about the position and admission. They said they're looking for someone to recruit African-American students to Grinnell. Would I be interested? And I said, Stephen, there's no way I'm going to go to Grinnell and be in Iowa, but I'll apply for the position and it'll give us an opportunity to hang out. So I applied, and sure enough, they interviewed me. So I drove to Grinnell, Iowa, and quite frankly fell in love with the place. It is just an amazing institution, and I spent once I got to campus, I realized that this is where I needed to be. This is where I needed to start my career, and that's how it happened for me. I mean, it was a friend who was there who had encouraged me to apply for the position. And so I started my career off in admission for Grinnell and did that for 3 years.
And so when you think about the process to then accomplish the job, and this is late 80s, I think, to set context for people,
Right.
just from a, time, technology, context,
Right.
how do you go and recruit African-American students to Grinnell? Like,
Well,
what do you start with? What are you equipped with? And what is the
right.
process to go and do that?
Right. Well, the one of the things about Grinnell was to be able to tell the story. It was a school that was founded by an abolitionist to begin with, and then you look at some of its alumni who passed through the doors of the institution, like a Herbie Hancock, for example, like a Ron Galt, who was senior VP at JP Morgan, and Jim Lowry, who started the Minority Business Report in Chicago, and the list goes on and on about a lot of its alumni who passed through those doors. And then you understand the story about the fact that it was the history of the institution is the fact that it's the first college west of the Mississippi to graduate an African American, and that was shortly after slavery, and when that occurred. And so that history was part of my reasoning for wanting to be at a place like that. So you start with that, and then you look at schools throughout the country, high schools. You go to areas like a Washington, D.C. or Chicago or Philadelphia to recruit students to Grinnell. Now, it already had somewhat of a pipeline that was established. There was one pipeline. There was a program called CHAMPS, Chicago Health and Medical Program, I think is what it was called. And ironically, there's a kid who I recruited from the CHAMPS high school program out of Chicago. He went to Lindblom High School in Chicago. He is now my mother's dentist. So that kind of tells you that the impact of a place like that. So you're recruiting kids from all over the country, and you're telling them the story, and you get them on campus, and then there was that commitment that the institution had toward them as well. I would tell you that most of my what I would call dearest and best friends are either students or people that I worked with at Grinnell who are part of my life to this day.
And along the way, you decided to pursue your own additional higher education.
Correct.
Over at the University of Iowa. So what led you to make that decision? And did you basically work and balance the master's program? Be able to take the time?
Quit cold turkey. And in fact, my spouse, when she decided to go to law school, I decided to go to graduate school. So we left, packed up, went 1 hour east and moved to Iowa City. And she went to law school, and I enrolled in a mass communication journalism program at the University of Iowa. And again, I never had the intention of being a journalist. It was really exploring. And in fact, before I left Iowa, I had, after I got my degree, I had contemplated doing a PhD in higher education, but then had the opportunity to get into advancement. But there are some things that occurred even before all of that. First of all, Grinnell helped support me through graduate school with the promise that I needed to come back to Grinnell to work there. So I did, and I worked in public relations, and realized that no, public relations is not for me. That's not what I want to do. And then I took a job at the University of Iowa, working in a program called Opportunity at Iowa. And today that would be called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, because that's exactly what the program was about. And I did that for 4.5 years at the University of Iowa. So more on the student affairs side, working with both admission and financial aid on recruiting students of color to the University of Iowa, recruiting and graduating those students. So I did that for 4.5 years. And I was literally minding my own business. This was the summer of '95. I was minding my own business. I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico at a conference, a national conference on race and ethnicity. And I ran into one of my late mentors now, Frank Thomas, and another group of folks who worked at Grinnell, who approached me and said, hey, we're getting ready to start a campaign, and you know a lot about the Grinnell. Would you be interested in coming back? And I said, for the third time. And what they didn't know is I was really interested in fundraising. And so 2 weeks after that encounter in Santa Fe, I interviewed for the job, my first advancement job back at Grinnell, and they hired me. And that's where I started my career in advancement.
There's a recurring theme of you minding your own business, and people
yeah, it is. I stay out of trouble. You got to do that, and when you do, and you kind of look, and you just never know what you may run into.
So you start in this advancement role at Grinnell, right, with a deep understanding of Grinnell, right? You've been selling the mission of Grinnell by way of your enrollment work. Right. At Opportunity Iowa, you get more exposure to the intersection of enrollment, student affairs, financial aid, which gives you a window into where the money comes from, right? Which in a lot of cases is going to be by way of philanthropy, but it was still new to you. And so when you think about your first 90 days in that advancement work, where now there's a number, there's hard dollars that you're focused on, was that a big change, a difficult change, a seamless transition because you had such a strong foundation? I mean, what are some of those early experiences of not going out and asking somebody to commit to attend the institution, but actually asking for support?
Well, I'll be frank with you. I think the biggest change was when I walked through the door and people saw me, because that was during a time that there was no LinkedIn, there was no social media where you could look up a person, right? So I would call and schedule an appointment, and they didn't know. You can see the surprised look on folks' face when I walked through the door, representing Grinnell College. And yet the other surprise to them was when I asked them for money to help support the institution, because that was my job. That was what I was supposed to do. And again, the relationship,
I mean,
yeah,
you say that with a smile, but I mean, that sounds hard. I mean, did it bother you? I mean,
I won't say that it was hard. It's life, right? It's something that's expected when you are in a position, in the kind of position that I was in. Now, today's world, it's a lot different. You can look up people and you can see what they look like. You can see where they've been. But, I think when when you get past all of that, people will respect you when they know that you're representing their alma mater in the right way and you're trying to engage them in the life of the institution at that. And then, what you look like after that doesn't matter. But there were a few surprise faces. There's no doubt about that. And to be honest with you, that gave me satisfaction more so than anything, because I knew that I could do this work, and I was proud to be able to do it. I was working at a very wonderful institution, and I was not going to be apologetic about asking for gifts to help support the institution. Similar to where I am now, and I know we're not here where I am in terms of our conversation, but when you work for wherever you work and you're in these roles, you can't be apologetic. You've got to believe in the institution.
And so when you think about some of those favorite experiences in the advancement work at Grinnell, any specific gifts or donor connections or unexpected outcomes that
well again, some of my closest relationships, there's a couple of trustees who I'm very close with. There's one who became a mentor of mine that I'm very close with, and then another mentor of mine who passed away just a few years ago. One passed away last year, another passed away 3 years ago. Very, very close to me. Two African American wonderful men who helped guide me in my career and in my life, and a guy named Barry Huff and another Frank Thomas, who were very close to me. But there's so many other people that I can name who I'm close to at that institution, and I stay in contact with those folks. And one of my best friends graduated from there. So it was again the beginning for me in terms of my advancement career is learning how to establish relationships, knowing how to establish genuine relationships with folks, and still being able to talk with them about their philanthropy at the same time. And so that played a major role. But let me take a step back too. There were imagine, and you may or may not know some of these names, but maybe some of the folks on your podcast will, but after my first 2 months of being at Grinnell in advancement, I went to a conference, and it was in Newton, Massachusetts. And the faculty at that conference, the conference was put on by the Institute of Charitable Giving, which was founded by Jerry Panis, the late Jerry Panis, and also Bill Sturdivant. So they were on the faculty. Karen Osborne was on the faculty. Dave Dunlap was on the faculty. And to have those folks at 2 months, here I am, 2 months in advancement, and those were my faculty members. I thought I just, knew everything after that about advancement, that no one could tell me anything about it. Now, obviously that wasn't true, but that was my foundation, as having that experience, having those professionals, all of whom had written books, and a Dave Dunlap who was credited with creating Moves Management. That was my faculty 2 months after I started at Grinnell College in advancement. And so that was the foundation that helped set me up to where I am now, quite frankly.
And help me then understand what led you back down Interstate 80. I mean, there aren't too many people who spend as much time on that part of Interstate 80 as you.
No,
you had the run at Grinnell, and then back to Iowa.
And by the way, when I worked in advancement for Grinnell, I still lived in Iowa City, so I commuted back and forth. It was a 1 hour commute. That stretch of the road pretty well. So I did that for 4.5 years before taking the position at the University of Iowa, at the University of Iowa Foundation.
And so it's the year 2000, and an opportunity emerges at Iowa
Right.
and you dug in there for a decade. Tell us about that experience, and I'll acknowledge that I was probably on a football visit with Coach Ferentz in his first year,
Oh,
just
wow.
kind of
Yeah,
getting set up there. So,
exactly. That is where University of Iowa was where I really learned how to do this work. It's where I became, for the lack of better words, a leader. Um, because, you know, if you don't know the organization, it's a very well run organization, and a lot of uh, institutions aspire to be as well run as that one. Um, and every organization has its it has its drawbacks, but in terms of being able to learn every aspect of what it is that we do and the work that we do in advancement, that's where I learned it. It's how to engage with donors, how to um, strategize and think about bringing donors closer to the institution, um, how to sit around and talk about the highest level of donors in the principal gift space, how to work with a dean or a unit director. All of those things for me occurred at the University of Iowa, and I was very fortunate to work with uh, great dean at the Tippy College of Business, who he and I, when we first got together, we bumped heads, but again, he's become again, he's another mentor of mine now to this day. And because I learned from him, and I like to think that he learned from me as well. But if you, as you are moving in the advancement world, you got to understand, you got to know how to work with unit directors, and deans and provosts and presidents, and understand how to engage with them and how they like to be engaged with their constituencies.
we spend a lot of time talking about how to build relationships with donors. I am sure, do not spend enough time talking about how do you build relationships with key partners like deans. And I've talked to enough of your peers over the years to know that uh, the vision, the message, the impact,
Yep.
all of that is secondary in many cases to, is there a strong relationship between the fundraiser and the dean? And if you can get that relationship right, the sky's the limit. But if you get it wrong, it almost doesn't matter what some of those other pillars of the work are. And so I'm just curious, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, or thinking about butting heads and then being able to turn that around, which is frankly pretty rare. Any lessons learned that you'd want to share with our listeners?
I think it's about listening. It's about listening to one another. He had an approach that worked for him, and I had one that worked for me, and we had to figure out how we're going to work with each other. I think it's about sitting down and being able to discuss what the expectations are, what his expectations are of me, and then learning that I was fortunate because not everyone has the kind of dean that says, yes, I want to travel, I want to get out, I want to meet with donors, and he and I we were able to do that on a consistent basis. It was not inconsistent at all. It was planned out, targeted, and we, spending time with each other and learning about each other, and how we approach working with our donors. That's what you have to do, and it's sometime you get it wrong. And the other thing is, one of the other things I've learned from him is, and I use this in my leadership now, is a lot of times we're afraid to take risk. And he was one of those individuals. He's like, let's try something different. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But, I think so often people are afraid to fail. And that is something that even with the team here at the University of Toledo, is to try to encourage them to try some different things, different approaches. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. We'll try something else. But if you put together a good strategy and approach to it, it actually may indeed work, and it's something that others can use and the whole organization can benefit from. So that is, every step of the way I learned something.
Up till this point, your entire life had been basically Iowa, Illinois, with a fair amount of travel, I'm sure, as you
Right.
took on those roles and conferences and admissions, recruitment, and fundraising and all of that. But you had the opportunity to uh, take a step up leadership wise, join the Ohio State University. Was that a tough decision? It's a big
Yeah, it
move.
was.
Yeah.
It was a tough decision, tough move because there are family considerations. Had at the time the kids were young. Um, the only thing that I will say about the move, I think that move to up until today or up until now, I think the move to Ohio benefited more my family, my kids, and my spouse than it did me in terms of professional sense. But I think, and like I said, up until now, because the position that I am in today at the University of Toledo was something that I looked at several years ago, and the timing just wasn't right. And I finally landed here, and the timing is definitely right for me to be here at the. This is the right time, the right place to be to help manage and lead and partner with folks here to move our advancement apparatus forward here at University of Toledo. But the move to Columbus was difficult. I said no several times. They kept recruiting me, and I eventually said yes, and we moved to Columbus, and so that's how we ended up in, and we've been in Ohio now for 12 years.
Highlight of the time at Ohio State, and then I want to make sure we can carve out plenty of time to cover the experience at Toledo.
I would say that not everyone has the experience of having misses, and that was a miss, and for a variety of different reasons, and so it's you learn from it. As I say, you can learn from every decision that you make, that you can make both personally and professionally. And I learned professionally from that one.
I appreciate you sharing. I think there's certainly a tendency sometimes to represent everything as a success, and so
Oh no.
don't need to push deeper. But I appreciate your willingness to kind of show a little vulnerability there.
Well, let's just say this: bigger is not always better.
So let's talk about the opportunity at Toledo. What inspired you to take the role? What were you excited about when you started learning about the institution? And then,
Yeah, Toledo. What I was excited about when I took this role back in February is what I was excited about several years ago. Except for there's a big important difference, and that's the leadership. The leadership was different than it is now. The president and Dr. Greg Posel, he and I have a very good partnership, right? And when you take these kind of positions, you have to have a good partnership with your president or your leader. You have to have that. But you look at that, but then you also look at the tremendous amount of potential here. School that has, for our size, about 15,000 students or so, and we have the depth and breadth of an institution that you're not going to find. It's very hard to find in the country. I think there are only about 16 other institutions that are similar to UT, where you've got pharmacology, you have law, you have a business school, you have a nursing school, you have a medical college, you have engineering, and then you also have a medical center, a wonderful honors program, and your arts and letters. So you've got all of this in this school that is not as large, again, as one of your Big Ten institutions. but yet we have it here. And when the attraction for me was the depth and breadth, and the fact that there's so many incredible opportunities that are taking place here that we need to really expand on. And we're in that process right now. The university is going through a strategic planning process. And I will say a strategic planning process that will actually be used. The institution is also entering into a sesquicentennial celebration coming this fall. And our hopes is after coming out of that, we will enter into a campaign to help move the university forward.
And how would you describe kind of the opportunities as it relates to advancement today? What is the maturity level when you think about the giving pyramid? Is it about just laser focus and telling that story at the top, broad-based work? I mean, what's the state of affairs today?
Well, I think we're still kind of fleshing some of those ideas out, and I don't want to give them all away, but we're fleshing those out. And I think once it's all said and done, you're going to see some incredible initiatives that our donors are going to be able to gravitate to. And it's going to be up to us. I think we're a very humble institution, and I think it's time for us to stop being humble and to start talking about some of the great things that are taking place here. And you'll see that in the coming months and years as things are progressing here at the university.
You stay busy outside of work. You stay busy at work and busy outside of work. And so there are two other themes that I want to cover, areas of interest I want to cover. First, you got to tell me about the Funk Daddies, and I wish I had queued up one of the tracks or one of the videos that I found out there. So we'll see if we can slice that in. But
you're kidding.
Daddies.
Yeah, that actually goes back again to my youth, and I'll tell you, because I got to tell you how I got to that point. I grew up singing in a very large church choir, and did anthems and spirituals and gospel music, and we traveled and made albums. Yes, I said albums, cut albums, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And so music is a passion of mine. Singing is a passion of mine. I'm actually taking voice lessons right now, in fact. And so when I'm in Iowa City, and I really had not done any singing at all, but I've always had a passion for not just music, but also R&B and funk, and got this opportunity to form a band and be one of the founding members of a band called Funk Daddies, as you mentioned. And I think Funk Daddies will be celebrating 20 years next year, I think, or something like that. Or is it 15? No, 15 years. Well, in any case, that's how I really got into it. And it was a wonderful experience, a good time to sing some of the tunes that I used to listen to growing up, Earth, Wind and Fire tunes, Commodores, Tower Power, and Stevie Wonder, and music like that.
What is your favorite Funk Daddies performance when you think about like the
favorite best performance?
The rush, the crowd. I mean, what stands out?
Well, for me, it was probably opening for the Beach Boys.
Amazing. Mic drop.
Yeah, it was probably opening for the Beach Boys for me. Now, the other guys in the band, they had done this before. I hadn't had that experience of opening for a well-known band, but they had. But for me, that would have been probably the pinnacle, was to have that opportunity to perform in front of I don't know how many people, maybe 10,000 folks or something. But good time.
I'm gonna go tell my dad that I'm interviewing a guy who opened for the Beach Boys, and he's gonna.
Don't be. No, just tell them I was a part of a group. Don't tell them it was just me. But they're still performing. I hope to get back to Iowa City sometime and join them. It'll be a lot of fun. It would be a lot of fun to do it.
Love it. Thank you for sharing.
No, you're
On a
welcome.
more serious note, as it relates to your side hustles, I know that you have played a huge role in establishing the Black Leaders in Philanthropy group. And as I've learned a little bit more about it, I was so pleased to see familiar names and faces in the group. But it just looks like an amazing group. And in particular, I think we'd be remiss to not just talk a little bit about the equity pledge, the Black Leaders in Philanthropy equity pledge. Just give me the background, the why behind this, and then I'd love to just quickly tick through some of the points as it relates to the pledge.
Well, I think I'll just for me again, it's all historical. I remember walking into a case conference shortly after I got into advancement work, and Brent, I walked into the room and I didn't see anybody that looked like me in there. And I thought, okay, either I'm going to complain about this, or I'm going to have to be part of the solution. And it was during that time that I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to connect with someone at Case who, asked if I would be willing to speak at a conference. And I'm thinking, well, I've only been doing this for a minute, but sure. And that's how I started really cutting my teeth, so forth, in terms of leadership and advancement, and because I decided that it was just as important for people who didn't look like me to see me as it was for people who did look like me to see me. And what Blacks in Philanthropy, what we're really trying to do is, I would like to see more people in leadership roles, more, and because there are a lot of very experienced folks out there doing this work, and they don't get the opportunity, for whatever reason, they don't get the opportunity. But the more people who have the experience, who are folks of color who get the opportunity, the more people who are trained, and then that is going to open up doors for those individuals. It'll be difficult for organizations to say, no, you don't have this, you don't have that. But that is what we're working toward. And that is why we set aside the time to mentor and to help guide folks through their careers, because some of us did not have, that opportunity to help people, to help them with their career and guide them through their career and through some of those hills and valleys that we all go through. And so I want to see, one day I want somebody to take my place, right? I want to see people grow and have the opportunity, to be frank with you, a lot sooner than I had the opportunity or thought about having the opportunity to be a leader in the field. Because that's the other thing. And here's something else that's very important. Not everyone needs to be a vice president. Not everyone needs to be an associate vice president. But what we're trying to do is open the doors for individuals to let them know that this is a really wonderful, fulfilling career. And whether they decide to stay at the director level or whether they decide to be a vice president, that's not what matters. What matters is the fact that they can have an impact. And the more folks that are drawn to this field, the better, because we have become a very diverse society. And let's face it, we are. And it's good to have diversity at all levels. And that is something that we're really, really pushing toward.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I will just encourage anybody listening, go to blacksinphilanthropy.com, look at the pledge. And what I would like to just say to you and to your teammates who established this is thank you. Because I think sometimes for people who look like me, you can get so overwhelmed by the magnitude of the issues out there. and you can feel like there is nothing I can do as a drop in this ocean, or where do I start, or what can I do to make progress, right? That I look back and say, I was on the right side of history, or I was, doing what I could in the context I was operating in to make a positive impact. And what I love about the pledge is there are just some really clear recommendations, some guidelines that everybody can learn from, react to. Do we have a search committee that reflects diversity by including 2 or more members of historically underrepresented groups?
Right.
Are we focused on non-traditional recruitment venues? Do we have 2 or more members of a historically underrepresented group in the pool of candidates for senior director, executive director, AVP, et cetera, positions? It's not the only way to think about it, but this is a clear framework that any of us can audit the work that we are doing. And it doesn't mean that every position is going to go to a person from a historically underrepresented group.
Correct.
But it does mean that we can ensure, right, that we are going above and beyond to just ensure progress and ensure a more level playing field, and to check the implicit or explicit bias that everybody deals with by way of referencing the pledge. And so I think it's beautifully written. It's really clear. I'm sure it was not easy to boil it down to 11 points. And then I'm sure whether it was 2 or 3 or 4 or what the numbers were must have been some debate, but you got there, you put it out there. And I'd love to know where you see that going and if you've received any feedback similar to what I just shared.
Well, it's really interesting because just this week alone, part of what we do is we mentor, some of those younger folks who are in the field, and I have a call tomorrow with one of them. So we take the time to do that, to discuss. We may get a call to say, "Hey, Floyd, there's a position that I'm interested in at this place. There's a good chance that I may know someone there or have been there." And we all know there are institutions that will tell someone, "No, I don't think you want to work there. That's not a place you want to go, and here's why." But here's a place that would be welcoming to you, because it's not about just advancing in your career. It's about being able to advance in your career where you're going to be successful. And making sure that people are put in positions where they can be successful. And there are a number of us now who have had the experience of either working at various institutions or know of someone who've worked at an institution where we can make a phone call and say, "Hey, let me call so-and-so on your behalf, and let me see what's going on there," and to get that feedback, because everyone, let me rephrase that. There are a lot of institutions who want to recruit people of color and members of the LGBTQ community and as part of their organizations. But what's more important is being able to recruit them so they can be also successful in those organizations. And not all of these organizations who want to do the recruitment are equipped to allow that person to be successful and to advance. That is what we need to get to. So it's not just a recruitment piece. It's almost like, if you look at it, let's do the rewind and look at it from the admission standpoint, right? It's not just about recruiting, it's about graduating. And so you have to be able to get from point A to point B. So yeah, I recruited this person, but then you say, you make an excuse of why they're not successful. But maybe you should look in the mirror and think about what you could have done to help make that person successful. So that's the other part of this.
Well, that's where the E and the I, and the B
Right.
and the J come in. And I think the elevation of a more holistic approach to move beyond just the D, just the diversity.
Correct.
And ensuring that full stack support. And I feel like that's one of the I don't know, silver linings and the challenges of the 2020s that I hope that in 10 years we look back and say, man, those were some tough times, but we changed the vocabulary, we changed the understanding, we changed the level of empathy around the equity and the inclusion aspects of driving
Correct.
better organizations.
No, you're absolutely right. And everything that you said prior to my interjection is I can only say amen to it, because I think you really nailed it. You hit all of the points, and you hit all of the points that we have been focusing attention on in the group. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the work. And we're at time. And man, this flew by. I just want to say thank you, but I also want to give you an opportunity. One, are you hiring? If folks want to be in touch with you, either directly by way of UT work or via Blacks in Philanthropy or the Funk Daddies for that matter,
we are hiring. We've got a position. We're looking for a director of events, and we're also looking for a senior director of corporate and foundation engagement. So if there's some folks that are out there that may be interested in one of those positions, let me know. And I'm sure that somewhere down the road, we're going to be looking at some other opportunities as well. But I want to thank you for the opportunity. Also, I have not done anything this in depth that I can really recall in quite some time, because I'm not one for going around talking about myself. But I appreciate you digging, and you found out about the Funk Daddies and all those kinds of things. So
everybody should Google the Funk Daddies. There's plenty of videos out there. We're going to figure out how to get some of the music in. But look, I mean, part of the reason we did this, Floyd, is because you and your peers in the advancement space spend so much time asking donors their stories, their experiences, their mentors, their formative inflection points when people tapped them on their shoulders, which led to their career paths. And I don't think we've done enough time as a sector, certainly as a vendor partner, of hearing your stories and the stories of your peers, and thinking of you at that lunch table, in that gymnasium, in the blizzard, driving that bus. I hope that lots of people listening, I hope someday somebody comes in and says, hey, I know I'm applying for this role, and I want you to know that I've listened to the Funk Daddies, and I really appreciated your perspective on, growing up in Chicago, and here's my take on it. That is all we're hoping for with this, is just a chance to elevate your voice and the voice of your peers who spend so much time hearing other people's stories and not enough time getting to tell your own. So thank you for coming on.
And thank you for that. And if I could say one last thing, the reason why I continue to do this work is because this work helps to save and change lives. That's why I've been doing this work, and it's just so rewarding. And now I'm at an institution where I feel that we're about to take off, and no pun to our rocket name, but we are, and to have the opportunity to be here and work with incredible leadership is a blessing for me at this stage in my career. So I appreciate the opportunity, appreciate talking with you, and anyone and everyone out there who wants to chat and get in touch. I'm more than happy to spend time.
Yeah, look, I'll say I read a sentence when I was prepping for this that stuck with me. You said at one point when you took the gig at U Toledo that when you graduated from college, you didn't think we'd still have students who are first gen. We still have to do. As a first gen student myself, I say thank you to you and to your peers. There's a lot of work left to do, and the impact, oftentimes, right, is shared by way of thousands of donors and billions of dollars, but it's the individual lives that are impacted, compounded, that do drive change in our society on a variety of fronts. And so thank you for sharing your journey. I encourage everybody to look up Floyd, look up Blacks in Philanthropy, look up U Toledo. And here's to the rockets flying. Thank you, Floyd. And with that, Brent is going to be signing off here with our guest, Floyd Akins, who is the Vice President for University Advancement at the University of Toledo. Thank you, Floyd.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.